The black Mercedes screeched to a halt, inches from the outstretched hand. Victor Hale didn't flinch. He never did. Through the tinted window, he watched the homeless man scramble backward, clutching a crumpled envelope to his chest like it was made of gold. The man's weathered face broke into an inexplicable smile, a smile that made Victor's jaw tighten with inexplicable irritation. "Drive," Victor commanded, his voice cutting through the leather-scented silence of the car's interior. James, his driver of 12 years, hesitated. "Sir, he's been trying to give you that letter for." "I said drive." The car lurched forward, leaving the man standing in the morning fog that rolled through downtown Seattle like a ghost. Victor returned to his tablet, scrolling through acquisition reports with the same emotional investment one might give to reading a grocery list. Numbers, projections, profit margins. These were the things that mattered. These were the things that made sense in a world that had stopped making sense the day Maria died. That had been 7 years ago. 7 years since the car accident that took his wife and left him with an empire he no longer wanted but couldn't bear to abandon. Work had become his morphine, numbing everything except the hollow ache that lived somewhere behind his sternum, an ache he'd learned to ignore with the same efficiency he applied to everything else. "Mr. Hale, your 9 o'clock is waiting in the conference room," James announced as they pulled into the underground parking of Hale Technologies Tower. Victor nodded, already mentally preparing for the quarterly board meeting. Another day of maintaining the armor. Another day of being the ruthless billionaire everyone expected him to be. What he didn't see, as the car disappeared into the building's steel belly, was the homeless man still standing on the corner, pressing the letter against his heart, whispering something into the wind before shuffling back to his cardboard shelter beneath the overpass. The boardroom on the 42nd floor smelled of expensive cologne and barely concealed ambition. 12 executives sat around the glass table like vultures waiting for a carcass to present itself. Victor took his seat at the head, his charcoal suit immaculate, his expression carved from granite. "Let's begin," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. Pleasantries were inefficient. Richard Morrison, his chief operating officer, stood to present the quarterly earnings. "We've exceeded projections by 18%. The restructuring, the layoffs you approved last quarter, saved us $42 million. The words hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Layoffs. Victor had signed off on terminating 300 employees without blinking. 300 families affected. 300 lives disrupted. But the stock had climbed 7 points, and that's what shareholders cared about. "The media's been brutal," added Patricia Chen, head of public relations, her voice tight with concern. "There's been backlash about the working conditions at our manufacturing plants. Allegations of—" "Handle it," Victor interrupted, his blue eyes cold as Arctic ice. "Pay for some positive press. Donate to a charity. Make it go away." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. Everyone always nodded. No one argued with Victor Hale. Not anymore. Not since he'd fired his last 3 vice presidents for what he called sentimentality interfering with profitability. The meeting droned on for 2 hours. Strategy, expansion, hostile takeovers. Victor listened with half his attention, while the other half wandered to places he didn't want it to go. To Maria's laugh, to the way she used to leave notes in his briefcase with ridiculous jokes and hearts drawn in the margins, to the person he'd been before loss had carved out his insides and left only this hollow shell of ambition and anger. "That's all," he finally announced, standing abruptly. The executives scrambled to gather their materials, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of his presence. As Victor walked to his office, his assistant, Rebecca, intercepted him in the hallway. She was young, efficient, and terrified of him, exactly how he preferred his employees. "Mr. Hale, security called again. That homeless man from this morning? He tried to enter the building. He was insisting he needed to deliver something to you personally." Victor's jaw clenched. "And?" "He was removed from the premises. But, sir, this has been going on for months. Every single morning he's there.
Always with that letter. Should we file a restraining order if he becomes a nuisance? Otherwise, I don't want to hear about it."
Rebecca's brown eyes flickered with something that might have been disapproval, but she knew better than to voice it. "Yes, sir. Also, your 7 o'clock dinner reservation at the Metropolitan has been confirmed." Another dinner alone at Seattle's most expensive restaurant. Another evening of perfect food, tasting like cardboard, while other diners whispered and stared at the billionaire eating by himself. Victor had stopped caring what people thought years ago. The weeks bled together like watercolors left in the rain. October became November, and still, every morning, the homeless man appeared on the corner. Victor had stopped looking at him directly, but he felt the weight of that presence like a stone in his shoe. Persistent, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore completely. "Sir, I really think you should know something," James said one particularly gray morning as they approached the corner. His voice carried a tremor Victor had never heard before. "What?" "That man, Samuel, I heard someone call him, he's not well. I saw him coughing last week and there was blood on his hands. He's getting sicker, but he still shows up every single day with that letter." Something twisted in Victor's chest, but he crushed it like a bug under his heel. "People make their choices in life, James. He chose whatever path led him to that corner. I chose mine. We're not responsible for each other's decisions."
James's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I don't know, sir. First time he hasn't been here." They drove on, but the absence felt louder than any presence had. Victor tried to focus on the day's agenda, a merger negotiation that would add another $100 million to his net worth, but his mind kept drifting back to that empty corner. At lunch, Rebecca knocked on his office door, her face pale. "Mr. Hale, building security wanted me to inform you that homeless man, Samuel, they found him last night. He passed away. Heart failure, they think. The cold and the conditions and—" The words hit Victor like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, turning to face the window so Rebecca wouldn't see whatever expression had cracked through his carefully maintained facade. "I see," he managed, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for informing me." Rebecca hesitated at the door. "Sir, they found something. The security guard, Marcus, he thought you should have it. He's holding it at the front desk if you—" "Send it up." 5 minutes later, Rebecca returned with a small plastic bag. Inside was a letter, water-stained and dirty, addressed in shaky handwriting to Mr. Victor Hale, Hale Technologies. Victor stared at it for a long moment after Rebecca left. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the bag, the first time his hands had trembled in 7 years. The envelope was thin, cheap, the kind you could buy at a dollar store. The paper inside had been folded and refolded so many times it was soft as cloth. He sat down heavily in his leather chair and began to read. "Dear Mr. Hale, I don't want your money. I know that's what you think, that I'm just another beggar with my hand out, looking for a handout from the rich man in his fancy car. But that's not why I've been waiting for you all these months, standing on that corner in the rain and the cold, hoping you might finally stop and take this letter. I wanted to thank you. I know that might seem strange. Thank you for what? For ignoring me? For driving past me every day like I'm invisible? No, Mr. Hale. I wanted to thank you for something that happened 7 years ago. Something you've probably forgotten entirely, but something that meant everything to me. Your company gave me a job when no one else would. I was Samuel Reeves, maintenance worker, employee number 4712. I worked in the basement of your headquarters building, fixing pipes and changing light bulbs and doing all the invisible work that keeps a place like that running. I was 53 years old, and I'd been unemployed for 2 years before Hale Technologies hired me. My wife had left me, my kids wouldn't speak to me. I was one step away from living on the streets, which, as you now know, is exactly where I ended up anyway. But for 18 months, I had dignity. I had purpose. I had a reason to wake up in the morning. I loved that job, Mr. Hale. I loved the smell of the building and the early morning hours before everyone arrived. I loved the routine of my rounds, knowing exactly which pipes would act up on cold days, which lights flickered in the west stairwell. I was good at my job. I was proud of my work. Then came the accusation. Do you remember it, Mr. Hale? Probably not. Why would you? You're at the top of the tower, and I was so far below you might as well have been in orbit while I was underground. But I remember every detail of that day like it's branded on my soul. Someone was embezzling money from the company. $50,000 missing from maintenance funds over 6 months. The investigation pointed to me. They said I'd authorized payments to fake vendors, pocketed the money myself. They showed me forged documents with what looked like my signature, financial records that seemed to prove my guilt. I didn't do it, Mr. Hale. I swear on everything that ever mattered to me, on my children's lives, on the memory of the love I once had, I didn't steal that money. But I couldn't prove my innocence. The evidence was overwhelming. And there was someone else, someone higher up the food chain than a maintenance worker who I knew was actually responsible. His name is Richard Morrison, your chief operating officer. He was a junior manager back then, ambitious and ruthless, willing to do anything to climb the corporate ladder. He orchestrated the whole thing, used me as a scapegoat because who would believe a maintenance worker over a rising star like him? And when they confronted me, when they showed me the proof of my theft, Morrison pulled me aside privately. He told me if I fought the accusations, he'd make sure my kids lost their college funds. He'd tell them I'd been stealing from their education accounts too, make them hate me even more than they already did. But if I went quietly, took the fall, he'd make sure they never knew anything except that I'd lost my job. He'd preserve what little remained of my relationship with them. So I took the blame, Mr. Hale. I let you fire me without defending myself because I was trying to protect the only thing I had left, the slim hope that someday my children might forgive me and let me back into their lives. You want to know something strange? Even after everything, I never hated you. I wanted to. God knows I tried. Sitting under that overpass in the freezing rain, watching the rats fight over scraps, feeling my body slowly breaking down, I tried so hard to hate you. It would have been easier than what I felt instead. What I felt was sadness. Sadness that a man who had once been good. Yes, Mr. Hale, I know you were good once. I saw the photos of you and your wife at company events. Saw the way you used to smile before tragedy carved it out of you. Had become so cold that he couldn't even see the people suffering right in front of him. I've been on that corner for 6 months, Mr. Hale. 6 months of holding this letter, hoping that just once you might stop. Just once you might look at me and see a human being instead of an inconvenience. Not because I wanted to hurt you with this information about Morrison, not because I wanted revenge or money or anything except to remind you of something important. You've forgotten how to be human, Mr. Hale, and I understand why. I truly do. Loss can hollow us out, make us build walls so high that nothing can touch us, good or bad. When my wife left, when my kids cut me off, I wanted to build those same walls. But living on the streets taught me something crucial. Walls don't protect us from pain. They just lock us in prison cells of our own making. I'm dying, Mr. Hale. I've known for months. Heart disease, the free clinic doctor told me. Nothing to be done about it without insurance, without money, without the resources that people like you take for granted. I probably have weeks left, maybe days. So this letter is my last gift to you, whether you want it or not. Fix what's broken in your company. Morrison is still stealing from you, I'm sure of it. Men like that don't stop.
But more importantly, fix what's broken in yourself. You've built an empire, but what good is it if you're too dead inside to feel anything? If you ever read this, remember, kindness is more powerful than any fortune you'll ever build. I learned that lesson too late, in the worst possible way. Don't make the same mistake. I forgive you, Victor. I forgive you for not seeing me. I forgive you for not caring. I hope you can forgive yourself for what you've become and find the courage to become something better. With genuine compassion, Samuel Reeves, employee number 4712. Victor's hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the letter. Tears, foreign, unexpected, painful, streamed down his face and splattered on a paper, blurring some of Samuel's words. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Maybe at Maria's funeral, but even then, he'd held it together, maintaining the stoic facade everyone expected. Now, alone in his office tower, reading the words of a dead man he'd ignored for 6 months, Victor Hale broke. He sobbed like a child, great gasping breaths that felt like they might tear him apart. 7 years of suppressed grief, guilt, and rage poured out of him in a flood that left him hollow and raw. Samuel's words echoed in his mind. You've forgotten how to be human. He had. Dear God, he had. Victor sat there for an hour, maybe more, the letter clutched in his hands like a lifeline. Then, slowly, methodically, he began making phone calls. The first was to his head of security. Pull all financial records from 7 years ago. Maintenance department, I want every transaction involving Richard Morrison cross-referenced with department authorizations. The second was to his legal team. Prepare a full investigation. I want it done quietly, but thoroughly. I'm looking for embezzlement. The third call he made himself to the Seattle Police Department. I have information about a potential theft at my company. I'd like to report it and request an official investigation. The fourth call was the hardest. He had to look up the number. Hadn't called it in years. Lighthouse Funeral Home? How can I help you? Victor's voice cracked. I need to know about a man who died recently, Samuel Reeves. I'd like to arrange a proper burial, and I'd like to know if he had any family, children maybe. The investigation took 3 weeks. Victor pushed it forward with the same ruthless efficiency he'd once applied to hostile takeovers, except this time the target was his own COO. The evidence was overwhelming. Morrison had been embezzling from the company for years, not just the initial $50,000. Over 7 years, he'd stolen nearly $2 million through a sophisticated scheme of fake vendors and authorized payments. When Victor confronted him, Morrison's face went white as paper. You can't prove anything, he stammered, but they both knew it was over. I can, Victor said quietly, his voice deadly calm, and I will. But first I want you to know something. Samuel Reeves died protecting his children from you. He gave up everything, his job, his dignity, his last chance at redemption, because you threatened what little he had left. He was a better man than either of us will ever be. It was just business, Morrison protested weakly. He was nobody, just some maintenance worker who... Victor's fist connected with Morrison's jaw before he could stop himself. The COO fell backward, crashing into the glass coffee table with a sound like thunder. Victor stood over him, breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding. Get out, he said. Security will escort you to the police station. If I ever see you again, I won't be responsible for what I do. The funeral was small. Samuel had 2 children, a daughter in Portland, a son in Denver, who came with their own families. They were shocked when Victor introduced himself, even more shocked when he told them the truth about what had happened to their father. He didn't steal anything, Victor said, standing in the funeral home's chapel, looking at Samuel's closed casket. He took the blame to protect you. He loved you that much.
Samuel's daughter, Jennifer, wept openly. "We wouldn't speak to him. The last 5 years of his life, we thought he was a thief, and we let him be homeless. We let him die alone." "He wasn't alone," Victor said softly, though the words felt like lies. Samuel had been profoundly alone, abandoned by everyone who should have cared. He had his dignity, he had his integrity, and he had compassion for people who didn't deserve it.
Victor paid for the funeral, established trust funds for Samuel's grandchildren, and personally delivered Samuel's letter to both his children so they could understand what kind of man their father had truly been. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. 3 months later, Hale Technologies announced the creation of the Samuel Reeves Foundation for Economic Justice. The foundation would provide legal aid, job training, and housing assistance to people who'd been wrongly accused of crimes or pushed into poverty through corporate negligence. Victor committed $200 million initially and pledged to match public donations dollar for dollar. He also changed his company's culture entirely. He instituted new policies protecting whistleblowers, established a genuine open-door policy where any employee could voice concerns directly to executive leadership, and most controversially, he cut his own salary by 80% to fund living wages for the company's lowest-paid workers. The board nearly revolted. Shareholders called for his removal. Financial analysts predicted disaster. Victor didn't care. He started taking the bus to work instead of the private car. He had lunch in the employee cafeteria instead of expensive restaurants. He learned the names of the maintenance workers, the security guards, the cleaning staff. He stopped seeing people as resources or obstacles and started seeing them as humans, complex, flawed, valuable humans. It wasn't easy. The habits of 7 years don't dissolve overnight. Some days he caught himself slipping into old patterns, measuring people's worth by their utility, viewing compassion as weakness. But then he'd think of Samuel standing on that corner, holding out a letter with trembling hands, refusing to give up on the hope that somewhere deep inside, Victor Hale was still human. The letter lived in Victor's desk drawer now, read and reread until he'd memorized every word. Some nights, alone in his too large penthouse, he'd take it out and run his fingers over Samuel's shaky handwriting, feeling the weight of all the moments he'd wasted being cruel instead of kind. One morning, exactly a year after Samuel's death, Victor left his apartment early. He walked to the corner where Samuel used to wait, now occupied by a different person, a young woman with a baby, huddled under a blanket. Victor stopped, really stopped, not just the brief pause of someone tossing change and hurrying on. He sat down on the cold concrete beside her. "Hi," he said. "I'm Victor. What's your name?" The woman looked at him with the same wariness Samuel must have felt every time Victor's car sped past. "Sarah, and this is Emma." She pulled the baby closer protectively. "Sarah, I'd like to help you, if you let me, not just with money, but with a job, housing, childcare, whatever you need to get back on your feet. No strings attached, no judgment, just one human being helping another." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" Victor smiled, the first genuine smile that had touched his face in years. "Because someone once reminded me what it means to be human, and I'm trying very hard not to forget again." He pulled out his phone and made a call. Within an hour, Sarah and baby Emma were in a warm hotel room with food, clean clothes, and an appointment with the Reeves Foundation's placement coordinator. It was a small thing, helping one person. It wouldn't bring Samuel back or undo the damage Victor had done, but it was a start. Victor walked back toward his office as morning light broke through Seattle's eternal clouds, painting the wet streets gold. He thought about Maria, about the man he'd been when she was alive, the man who laughed easily and cared deeply and believed the best of people. That man had died with her, buried under grief and bitterness. But maybe, just maybe,
he could be resurrected. Not as who he was, but as someone new. Someone forged in the fire of loss and failure and hard-won redemption. Someone who understood that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the capacity to see suffering and choose every single day to do something about it. The last line of Samuel's letter echoed in his mind. Kindness is more powerful than any fortune you'll ever build. Victor Hale had spent 7 years building a fortune and losing his soul. Now he would spend however many years he had left trying to get it back. One act of kindness at a time, one human connection at a time, one moment of genuine compassion at a time. It wouldn't be easy. Some days, he knew, he would fail. But he would keep trying, keep fighting against the cold that wanted to reclaim his heart, keep choosing humanity over efficiency, connection over isolation, love over fear. Because Samuel Reeves, employee number 4712, had given him one last chance to be human. And Victor intended to take it.